Good afternoon, everybody. My name is A Marvelous. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you for checking me out. Tonight's theme is how women will be used as the new face of evil, or should I say, to hide evil that will be done in the upcoming years. I say about 4 to 8 years. First, I'd like to say rest in definite power and peace to Prince. Definitely one of the greatest. The Prince of music, a legend, a true dove. And I also want to say that I dedicate this show primarily to Steve Coakley, another legend, a decoder, and an individual with a great heart. May both individuals rest peacefully, and may your memory, legacy, and soul live on eternally. Okay, and also in the backdrop of this theme will be Harriet Tubman and the $20 bill, and of course Hillary Clinton. And all of this will be tied into each other to show how in the next few years a lot of things will be going down, and women will be the definite face to hide the evil deeds that the power structure does, and women will be symbolic amongst a lot of important decision making to affect everyone's life, not just in America but globally. And this is also a time when women would need to be careful because a lot of things will happen to women primarily, especially, if Hillary Clinton becomes president, these things will be evident. And, I'll do my best to show how this will be so by using the current Obama administration, using, how things have led up to that before he was elected and the things that happened to black men while he was elected, being that the black male or black people were the new face to hide evil deeds. And the shadow of that was that a lot of detrimental, derelict, and dangerous things have happened to black people while Obama was in office. And the same thing will be happening to women as time goes on. Now, it's important to note first that right now, more than ever before, women are in charge of the money, meaning that they supervise it. Right now, women are in high positions of finance, and this has never happened before in this country in such numbers. And why do I say that? Now, as we progress in the show, the main people to look for um, is probably 4 or 5 in general. And I'm going to go over each one, and these are going to be the individuals to pay attention to when you watch the news as so-called manufactured terrorist attacks and other crises come about. Most likely, women will be there to deliver the band-aid and, the bad news and the message of hope. The message of hope, the theme of hope, is a theme that has been used to kind of quiet down anyone that questions or is a rebel to things that is going on in America that just doesn't seem kosher. Obama won on hope, and it is my opinion that Hillary will win just off the spiritual atmosphere that's going on and the simple fact that I just don't think the powers that be will, even though he's related to Hillary, will be allowed to rule and still carry on an agenda. Now, with that said, I want to start off with an old, not so old, maybe about 7 years, an article from the Atlantic magazine. And this was the January, February 2009 issue. And on the cover is Obama with the headline, "The End of White America." And I'm just going to read the first few paragraphs of the magazine just to give you a context of how the power structure has to keep shifting the faces of evil in order for the agenda to be carried out. Because if the same faces showed over and over again, eventually too many people would wake up too fast, and that may cause a problem to the individuals that do run this country. And as I do more videos, and in the name of Steve Coakley, I'm not going to fall victim like most people do by, always referring to this mysterious they and mysterious power structure, because that doesn't really hold weight to understanding what we're dealing with. You have to put a face to the individuals that you assert, or I assert, or we assert is the ones responsible for orchestrated terror, orchestrated fear, and I don't like to use this word, but for lack of a better word, orchestrated oppression. And so in this video, I'm definitely going to name the names and put the faces at a high level. And I'm going to try to do that, not try, attempt to do that in most of the videos that I do from now on. This way, it's no more spookiness, and you can actually have a feel visually for who we're dealing with. But with that said, let me just read a few paragraphs from this Atlantic article titled "The End of White America." The election of Barack Obama is just the most startling manifestation of a larger trend, the gradual erosion of whiteness as the touchstone of what it means to be American. If the end of white America is a cultural and demographic inevitability, what will the new mainstream look like? And how will white Americans fit into it? What will it mean to be white when whiteness is no longer the norm? And will a post-white America be less racially divided or more so? Now, the article goes on to give a quote from a book, and it's going to mention the book, and it starts like this. Civilization's going to pieces, he remarks. He is in polite company, gathered with friends around a bottle of wine in a late afternoon sun, chatting and gossiping. I've gotten to be a terrible pessimist about things. Have you read The Rise of the Colored Empires by this man Goddard? They hadn't. Well, it's a fine book, and everyone ought to read it. Everybody ought to read it. This idea is if we don't look out, the white race will be utterly submerged. It's all scientific stuff. It's been proved. So that was a quote from the book, and it goes on the article to say he is Tom Buchanan, a character in F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. Now this is in a quote in a classic American literature, a book that nearly everyone who passes through the American education system is compelled to read at least once. Although Gatsby doesn't gloss as a book on racial anxiety, it's too busy exploring a different set of anxieties entirely. Buchanan was hardly alone in feeling besieged. The book, by this man Goddard, had a real-world analog. Lothrop Stoddard's The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy, published in 1920, 5 years before Gatsby. 9 decades later, Stoddard's polemic remains oddly engrossing. He refers to World War I as the White Civil War and laments the cycle of ruin that may result in if the white world continues its infighting. The book features a series of fold-out maps depicting the distribution of color throughout the world and warns colored migration is a universal peril, menacing every part of the white world. Now, what would make such a, I suggest everyone picks up the Atlantic regularly because they give you the current pulse of this country and always gives you a historical context across a present outlook with a future progressive state of mind to be in terms of America's panics, paranoias, and fears. So this article was in 2009, Obama just taking office, and it's as a call of caution to white America. Just as you can read by it, and it's showing you the fears that underline a certain demographic in this country, especially now that a black man has become president. Now, what does that mean? This explains the fears of white America, Caucasians, being that a black man has been president, in parentheses, of course, has never been happened. So this is showing you, it's a warning call as to what to look out for. And this is a fear that has been plaguing Caucasians for quite some time. As you can see, the article opens up quoting The Great Gatsby, which is something that came about during the early turn of the century. So with Obama becoming president, you can see the backdrop is the fear that Caucasians have, which has always been there, but it's more prevalent now because America is the so-called dominant society that whiteness is eroding. But what the article does not mention is that white Americans aren't the only ones that should have been fearful. And what I mean by that is during the Obama administration, a lot of black people were happy, they hands clapping, our time has come. But now that the Obama regime is ending, as you can see what happened in the past, 8 years. Black men have been getting shot and killed in mass levels, and it's been on public display. So the black man is kind of have been attacked viciously, publicly, with reckless regard, with police officers getting no jail time, excuses being made for him. Now, even though this is business as usual, the fact that this happened on the watch of a black man is very telling. That means that Obama was really the red herring. It was like kind of the perfect smokescreen to get things through. And other themes that has been come about since Obama has been ISIS, also manufactured, government state sponsored terrorism. So the reason why Obama was elected was because spiritually the country's psyche could no longer take the type of evil that was spread during the Bush administration. And whether you were white, black, whatever your ethnicity, race, whatever you claim, um, the country could no longer take evil from the face of white men. Even though the power position is dominated by white men, it just could not take it anymore. And why do I say that? Um, After and during George Bush, 9/11 occurred, obviously. And when 9/11 occurred, the new boogeyman on the surface in everyday people's life was no longer uh, the black man or black people. It became the Arab. It became Islam. So when this happened, in a sense, everyone in America, even in their divisive terms, had to come together because now the common boogeyman was no longer one of the common faces of America, being black, white, etc. It was now Islam and Arab. So that new boogeyman kind of brought all Americans together. So what happened now is, since Bush was in office, and a lot of people knew the real deal behind 9/11, and with the mortgage crisis, the psyche of the country could no longer take spiritually and internally white visible rulership being that of a white male in this country. It just could not happen. And being that you have this new revised boogeyman with Al Qaeda, Islam, and fake terrorism, the only possible choice that could possibly combat such a boogeyman is if you bring up another boogeyman. And America's historical boogeyman has always been the black man. So, what better archetype to fight terrorism than a boogeyman in himself? And the history of this country with black people has always been no stranger to promoting uh, individuals that were black, as long as they toed a certain line, didn't rebel, bucked the curve, and they kind of followed orders in a sense. As long as that can happen from a black person and they follow the rules and follow the laws of success, they'll rise to prominence. Hence Obama. So Obama was the archetype for fighting the boogeyman of terrorism, i.e., Arabs and Islam. It also served as a new face of leadership in which we can give Caucasian men a break from always being the dominant force visibly of enacting crimes of evil. And it also served as a quieting mechanism for black America, in which case it always can be said that there's a certain complaint level that black people do in terms of their rights and civil rights. So a black man becoming president, these things would no longer be an issue in the eyes of white America, because what do you have to complain about? You now have a black president. So the Obama regime represented a lot of faces to mask a lot of deeds, to hopefully combat a lot of different things that people wanted to be eliminated. And what were the major issues during the Obama regime? Again, it was the mortgage crisis, it was racism, terrorism. Okay, those are important themes. So if you look towards the end of the Obama regime, terrorism is still on the rise because we had an unprecedented level of attacks. Visibly, there's lots of attacks, but it's all about what's reported. I believe more attacks visibly than the Bush administration, Bush Jr. More visible police attacks against black males. And it's also interesting to note that during the Bush administration, Bush prided himself on providing mortgages and home opportunities to more African Americans than any other president. That was the setup. And when he left, obviously the mortgage crisis happened, and what scapegoat came in, what beacon of hope came in to appease the people from their outrage? It was this black man, Barack Obama, you know, to kind of patch up the damage that's been done in the previous generation. But what has happened? New York currently has the highest homeless percentage in the country, DC being second. Manhattan by itself is 60% of the homelessness in New York is in Manhattan. So you are now seeing the effects of the prior generation carrying over to the next generation. Now, I'm saying all of this to give context for the upcoming regime, which will be headed by women, and they will also be used as the new face of evil, meaning that whatever you see a woman present to you legislation or present anything to you in the open visible culture, in the open visible media and world events, the backdrop to that is going to be something dangerous that you will not be aware of because you'll be paying attention to the message presented by women, but you're not looking at what's happening and what's not being presented. And this happened with Obama and the terrorist theme, mortgage crisis, shooting of black men, etc., etc. So with that, I want to set the context to currently. Now, as a new regime comes to an end, you start to see seeds of the future, right? George Bush gave more homes than anybody, any African Americans, no other president awarded more homes than George Bush. So this was setting the backdrop to what was going to happen. As that happened, the crisis came, and you had record numbers of foreclosures. You had large investment banks shutting down. So that was again the red herring. The setup to make things seem like everything was great, and then as the tide washes ashore, the chaos comes, and whoever's left to manage the chaos is going to be the individual that has to bear the burden of fixing that problem. And that's what Obama was responsible for, fixing the problem of George Bush giving all these phony mortgages, but praising the fact that those mortgages allowed home ownership to increase, which resulted in less home ownership, especially for Generation X, which has the lowest rate of home ownership right now. And all of these things came to surface with the black man as the face of all of these climates and all of these tensions that's going on in the country. Now, as the new face comes into play, the old face starts to wash away. So this transition it has went from the white male to the black male, and now the new face is going to be women. Now, the thing with women being the new face of power is that all genders can be used. Very different. All genders will be used. And this leads me to Harriet Tubman being on a $20 bill. One would ask yourself, well, how is this possible? Well, there was a commission where last year this issue came up, and there was a series of women that was voted to be on the $20 bill. And apparently the overwhelming majority of people, because they took a vote, and the vote came in, a poll, should I say, and most of the people on the poll, it was, I think, over 1 million people, suggested Harriet Tubman. Now, this is interesting. what that shows to me is that the pulse of the country is a different kind of change. The fact that they had Harriet Tubman, not just any woman, but Harriet Tubman, shows that the theme of blackness is still necessary in order to quiet down loud voices of unhappiness. But the fact that it's a female also shows that this face will also be in a different form. And what do I mean by that? The fact that it's a black woman also means that they're going to use the energies of the Obama administration, using black people as um, still the lower class in terms of production in this country, but still a necessary face that people can trust in order to combat terrorism, where you don't get overly suspicious. At the same time, the fact that it's a woman is going to be a new type of energy that's going to be used in order to appease the people to think that change is coming for the better. And when in actuality, the same story is going to be told just through a different image. And right now, the women that are in charge of the money, let's look at who we're dealing with. The first is Janet Yellen. Now, who is Janet Yellen? Janet Yellen is the current chair of the board of directors of the Federal Reserve. Now, this is the first time that a woman has become chair of the Federal Reserve. It has never happened. Janet Yellen is she was born to a Jewish family, born in Brooklyn, New York. So it's going to be very important to pay attention to this woman anytime she makes a speech, because this is going to determine how you borrow money. This is going to determine how much money you will make, and also important to notice the economic policies that come about. So anytime you see this woman, women in general, but primarily this woman, be very careful to the economic policies that come out, because those policies will definitely affect how you operate economically over the next 4 to 8 years minimum. Also, a lot of the policies may not be beneficial and may be actually dangerous to you. So anytime you see women, on this woman, understand that your money is going to be affected and you need to pay attention. Now, Janet Yellen is known on Wall Street as a dove. Now, it's interesting that this term comes up because Prince died yesterday, and obviously he's known for When Doves Cry, classic song. And we are familiar with what a dove looks like. But financially, a dove has a completely different meaning. And keep in mind that being that women are going to be used to mask evil that comes about, it's very important to get into the philosophy of the women in power. And Janet Yellen has a particular economic philosophy that she has been known for. And currently, she is known on Wall Street as a dove. So, what is a dove? What is a monetary dove? A monetary dove is a term used to describe someone who emphasizes other issues, especially low employment over low inflation. So, this is interesting. So, that means Janet Yellen is Wall Street's dove. So, she is going to be focusing highly on unemployment. And what has been one of the major issues within the last year, it's been the whole increase in minimum wage and things like that. So definitely pay attention to Janet Yellen. Definitely pay attention to unemployment, and also pay attention to how anytime you feel a tight squeeze in your pockets, it's going to be because of policies that are going to be passed that may not be beneficial to you or I. So that's very important. So Janet Yellen is one of the five, I've chosen five, really four, to Mount Rushmore in the face of evil. For 4 or 5, she's one of the main ones. She is Wall Street's financial dove. And she was also responsible for the large amounts of money that helped Wall Street generate and that created more wealth than any other time in history, was largely due to her economic advisement to Bill Clinton and her involvement with the Fed in the 1990s. And the fact that she's the first woman in this position means that she's nothing to play with. So a lot of your policies that might not be in our interests will definitely come down as her being the primary cause. So it's very important to pay attention to her. She is one of the faces that will be used to mask a lot of things that will strip your rights away. And she has lots of accolades. She was included in the 50 most influential list in the Bloomberg markets. She was in 2014, according to Forbes, as the second most powerful woman in the world. She is the highest ranking American on that list. So these are the circumstances that started to brew during the Obama generation, the Obama regime. She became the chair recently, maybe about 5 years ago. Actually, she was sworn in 2014. So all of this female energy was brewing during the Obama administration. And she's one of a few that will totally dictate how policy is going to be enforced. Now, I want to take a break here and fast forward to another Atlantic article just to show you the rising theme of how women will be used to kind of quiet you down and lull you to sleep, especially when it comes to economics. There's another article in the Atlantic. This article was August 13th, 2014. And I came across this article when I was looking up another woman in power who I'll go over. Her name is Rosa Gumatautal Rios. That's Rosa Gumatautal Rios. She is the 43rd and current Treasurer of the United States, and she is the 6th Latina to occupy the office, the 3rd consecutive Californian, and the 3rd consecutive Hispanic female to do so. So this is interesting. So now we have the head of the Fed, which is Janet Yellen, who is a woman, and now we have the individuals responsible for actually printing and engraving our money is also a woman. So you start to see that the new face of mostly everything will be under the guise of women. And the powers that be, who we're naming them, will use women to kind of speak to the masses as if they're one of us, speak to the public in a relatable form to kind of get us to feel comfortable that things are going to be okay, to feel like we can relate to government, because lately, ever since Bush, well, in general, there's a sentiment of government that it just doesn't have the people's back. So now women will be used to kind of make us feel comfortable, to make us really feel hope, to make us really relate to things and kind of quiet the storm of all the tensions that's been happening. Because women can appeal to everyone. And that's the one difference between any other male that has been in power. If it's a black male, he can't appeal to everyone. White male can't appeal to everyone. But when you have women of all races, there's nobody left behind. So that means that there's no demographic that won't be appealed to in this country, because it's not just white women, it's all women will be used as the face of evil. So every single person, every single ethnicity will be reached in the sense of attempting to quiet down any kind of questioning and rebellion, and women will be used to do so. Now, let's go to this article again in the Atlantic. The article is called "Why Have All the U.S. Treasurers Since 1949 Been Women?" And this article was August 13th, 2014. And it starts like this. For the last 6 decades, presidents have treated the position as a low-risk, high-visibility job that promotes the appearance of diversity while rewarding loyal supporters. Then it goes on to say, when Janet Yellen made history last year by becoming the first female chair of the Federal Reserve, economists and sexual equality advocates alike cheered the move, but it also renewed scrutiny of the gender gap at the top of the U.S. government's financial institutions. While departments such as Commerce and Interior have seen female chiefs come into their ranks, the Fed and Treasury continue to be led mostly by white men. But the familiar narrative of finance's boys' club leaves out the little-known but important fact that every U.S. treasurer whose name appears on every printed U.S. dollar has been a woman for the last 60 years. Several of those women have been Latina. One was African American. Why? Now hold that thought for a minute. I'm going to skip, and the article continues to read like this. Of course, the U.S. Treasurer is much more ceremonial job than the power position of Treasury Secretary. Side note, we all know why that is, because of the way the Fed is set up. It has to be, but that's another topic. Article goes on to say a role that has only ever been held by white men. Currently by Jack Lew, who's also Jewish, who is the Secretary of Treasury right now, currently in the Obama regime. The current treasurer, Rosa Rios, the sixth Latina ever to hold the job, advises top Treasury and finance officials and directly oversees the U.S. Mint and the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. But Rios, and this is very important, cannot create policy the way Lew can, who is Jewish, or Yellen can, who is Jewish. Nor is her job as crucial to the functioning of the administration as theirs is. Ever since a woman was first appointed, the treasurer position has been seen long stretches of vacancies totaling 3,359 days or 9 years. So now we have your monetary policy being dictated by a woman, and we have the money that's actually being printed and the decisions around that printing is actually held by a woman. So now you start to see that the tide is changing from black males being the figurehead to mask everything and major themes that go on to it being women. Women will be the new scapegoats. 100%. And this is why, again, I believe Hillary Clinton will win. She will be the chief woman in charge with the Council of Women. And now women will also be under attack. And they will also be used as the face of oppression. So you definitely need to keep this in mind. Because anytime you see any kind of appeals to our psyche, appeals to calm us down as citizens, this will most likely be presented through women. 100%, just like it was done in the Obama regime. You know, black males was the theme for appeasing and also was the theme for violence. So wherever the women go, in the media, in the public, pay attention to. So now we went over Janet Yellen, Fed chair, first woman ever. And now we went over Rosa Rios. Next, we're going to go to, now we're starting to get into a more global picture because this isn't just about America. This is a global picture right here. The energy that's going on now, women have to be in the forefront, and that's the positive. Women are rising up. Women are gaining more of their freedom, gaining more of their voice. So this is very crucial. So on the positive end, this is a good sign because women were one of the oppressed, attacked classes throughout history. And if you follow history, especially American history with the law, you will notice that white males obviously have had all of the privilege. But whenever barriers of privilege have been broken down or attacked to make it to where it's not just a white male club, it always has a certain succession of order. First, black people are the ones to start rebelling and making the noise to gain rights and freedoms. Then once that happens, the domino effect happens and everyone hops on the gravy train. Blacks were the first to vote, 1870, and then from there came women's rights. women's suffrage in around 1919, 1920, which also is another reason as to why Harriet Tubman is on this currency, is because it's going to be 100 years since women gained the right to vote, 1919, 2020. So it's always been a domino effect from black people, then women, and then insert class here. After women, the new face can be Asian. Why do I say that? Because Asians, obviously, China is the dominant force when it comes to world currency and economics. But not only that, the president of the World Bank, the head of the World Bank, is Asian, South Korean. So, this is how the energy flows. This is how the spirit works, and this is how the power structure um, plays its games. It follows a pattern and a domino effect of transitioning its deeds from one face to another, so that your anger will be quieted down, and the level in which they can appease us is higher if they keep switching the faces of how the games are played, how the evil is manifested. So white males could no longer be the dominant face. So new scapegoats come. Black males was the scapegoat. Black people were the scapegoat. Now it's women. And then after women, it's going to be Asians and then homosexuals. Any face that can come about to carry out the agenda, the power structure has no problem using that face because they're highly objective, soulless individuals. And with that said, the next person we'll focus on is Christine Lagarde. Who is Christine Lagarde? Ironically, the same day Prince died, the Dove, Time magazine also came out with Time 100. And guess who is associated with the Time 100 most influential people? That's right. It's the new face where evil will be masked. And this is Christine Lagarde. I believe, check it out. It came out yesterday, April 21st, 2016. It says Christine Lagarde, Time 100 Leaders by, ironically, Janet Yellen. And it reads a little something like this. Again, this is Time 100 Most Influential People, April 21st, 2016. Guardian of the global economy. No organization is more crucial to the stability of the global economy than the International Monetary Fund. Its decisions affect billions of people, so the person who heads the IMF must be an outstanding, effective leader. Christine Lagarde meets this high standard. She has ably led the IMF through a tumultuous era for the world economy since she was chosen in 2011 by the more than 100 nations that govern the organization. Now, pause. Notice that this woman was chosen during the Obama regime, and she was chosen by 100 nations. So what is that telling you? That female energy now is being felt around the world. You can't get past it. This is what the spirit is saying. You must respect it. On the positive end, it means that women will be more empowered and uplifted, more opportunities, which is great. On the negative end, those that do control everyday circumstances globally and in this country will also use that energy as the face of evil. So all staged events, your terrorist attacks, your economic policy, your restrictive gun policies, which also was on the rise with Obama with all these manufactured shootings and everything, terrorist attacks, will also now be played out through women. You may see more terrorist attacks where women are responsible for them, which you've seen last year. You may see a lot more of these events happen with women at the forefront. And this woman is now head of the IMF. And obviously, we know what the IMF is. If you get the book Economic Hitman, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, you will see that the IMF, well, let's see what the magazine defines the IMF as. It says Christine is a trailblazer, the first woman to lead a major international organization like the IMF and, as finance minister of her native France, the first woman to hold this key role in any large advanced economy. The IMF lends to member governments with the goal of minimizing the long-term damage of financial crisis and preventing them from spreading. Christine was central to the effort to stabilize Greece's economy and prevent a wider crisis in Europe. She has spurred economic reform in emerging nations like China that have appropriately gained more of a voice at the IMF. She has also given the IMF a more human face. This is very interesting, and I'm going to go back to the Atlantic article to give why that's important. Listen to what this says. She has also given the IMF a more human face by addressing issues like gender and income inequality and public health threats like the Ebola virus. Now, that's very important, especially to this theme. It says that Christine has given a human face. What does that mean? It means that she's given a more relatable, a more emotional, a more acceptable face to presenting these dark issues to the general public. And that's what women are going to be doing. Things like it says here gender, income inequality, public health threats. All of these issues now will be pushed towards the individual in this country and in the world on a huge level with women doing it because it will make these issues more relatable. It will make you more empathetic to it. It will make you question less. Now, this is interesting because back to the Atlantic article about the Treasury, it also mentions something about optics. And what does that mean? Let me continue from the article. It says, still according to Alice Eagley, a social psychologist at Northwestern University who studies women and leadership, part of the decision to choose women and minorities for the treasurer position can boil down to optics. Eagley notes that it's easier for presidents to actively engineer diversity with less scrutinized positions like treasurer compared with, say, Yellen's job. But the overall picture becomes more nuanced when you consider that, in addition to their official duties, treasurers also work as ambassadors for economic development in lower income and underserved communities where the Treasury wants to foster growth. Viewed in this light, optics is not a trivial thing, according to Heidi Hartman, an economist and the founder of the Institute for Women's Policy Research. Marginalized communities, Hartman says, tend to be deeply suspicious of the government's financial institution. Also part of the Treasury is the IRS. Now, this, I think, single-handedly explains the theme of this whole piece here. It says, and I'm going to read this again, marginalized communities, which is your poor communities, hoods, Hartman says, tend to be deeply suspicious of the government's financial institutions. So what is this saying? The average Joe, the person in the hood, the person in the urban neighborhoods, the marginalized, another word for being on the fringe, broke, poor, destitute. These individuals in these communities, according to this article, tend to be deeply suspicious of the government's financial institution. For that reason, in this position of the Treasury, women have been used as optics, as a visual representation in order to spread whatever policies that these finance institutions need to be spread. So here's my thing. If these policies were so helpful in the eyes of the American public, why would they be deeply suspicious of these same financial institutions? So this is an open recognition that unless you're super rich, these communities are innately suspicious of government and their finance institutions. So the way that the powers that be implement a counter attack to that is to change the face of evil. Now it's going to be women. Women are going to be the optics, the eye candy, the um, the peaceful doves, as they say, in order to engineer diversity with less scrutinized positions. So you will be pandered to, you will be pleaded with, you will be praised, whatever it is that is a nice form to get you to conform to whatever the agenda is for the individuals that dominate the world and America. It will be presented by women. They will be the velvet glove, the red herring. So that's very important. So that article, as well as this one, the Time 100 Most Influential People, where it says that Christine Lagarde has also given the IMF a more human face by addressing issues like gender and income inequality and public health threats like the Ebola virus. Be very careful. These smiling faces do not come in peace. They come in a higher, advanced, more subtle form of oppression. Now, I'm not saying this to be doom and gloom. I'm actually making this video as an early preparation warning system to kind of see the trends in a more real-time sense. Because with the Obama regime, we was most definitely, some of us were, not myself, but generally we were lulled to sleep thinking that hope would come, when in reality it was just masked for more agenda. The gun issue was more at stake, meaning that the push to strip our rights of the right to bear arms is elevated to an even higher level. Homosexuality, all of these issues, all of these controversial issues have been pushed at a more advanced level, and it's been done under a face of the black man, peace, and hope, when in sense it created more despair, more killing, more violence. And now this torch is being passed because everything was set up, as you see. These individuals were put in a position during the Obama regime. Christine Lagarde, Janet Yellen, Rosa Rios. These individuals were placed in the position the same time that Obama was. And that's what Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill represents. It represents a common link between the current face of evil, which is the black male, to the new face of evil, should I say the new face to hide evil, women, all races, all ethnicities. Harriet Tubman represents that passing of the torch, that link from one velvet glove to another. And that is what she represents. And it's no coincidence that they chose Harriet Tubman to be replacing Andrew Jackson, known slave owner, relentless tormentor of Indians, but also an opponent to the Federal Reserve. Relentless opponent. In fact, he's the reason why it was delayed by about 80, 90 years. So you got to look at these things. This is very important. There were so many people that they could have replaced this with, but yet they chose Andrew Jackson, right? Because Andrew Jackson also, assassination attempt. Why? Because he opposed the implementation of the Federal Reserve. You have to look at that. So it is more important, and this is very, see, the powers that be have no problem elevating past revolutionaries, past opponents of the government, even extreme, most outspoken black power individuals will be given boulevards and street names and all type of accolades once they are killed off, of course, or dead, because the main objective isn't race. The main objective is control. So they have no problem putting a great woman like Harriet Tubman on a $20 bill if the image of that is higher than the image of someone like an Andrew Jackson, who actually fought against the power structure when it came to oppression. He was one of the first opponents of a central bank in America. So that should tell you that there's individuals outside of the president, higher authority and more power than the president, that are running things. So that is, I think, another reason why Harriet Tubman replaced Andrew Jackson instead of other denominations and other so-called founding fathers, because he was a definite opponent of the Federal Reserve, or should I say a central bank. So it makes sense that you replace this combination of black and female empowerment, and so, because even in, I'm not a religious person, but if I'm not mistaken, even in the Bible, graven image is worse in the offense of the Ten Commandments than is murder. So a graven image in this country is of higher order than murder. So the new graven image for your $20 bill, which was formerly the face held by a opposer of central government, is very, very significant, and it's very symbolic. It's telling you that your economics is heavily going to be attacked. It's telling you that now black people will be the backdrop to lull us to sleep, and in the forefront of lulling us to sleep and making us feel comfortable will most definitely be women. And that is what Harriet Tubman represents on a $20 bill. A unification, as well as passing the torch of the two faces of evil in this country that psychologically we can handle, in order for us to not go completely crazy. Because if it continued to be white men with such reckless abandon like George Bush, and contributing to bringing the Twin Towers down and all of this craziness, it is no question that all races would unite, because the common enemy would be noticed. And this is the mistake that the white Southerner has made in the 1800s. The white Southerner constantly abused the black man and black people in general, but were too coward to fight the bankers and the families that were manipulating all races for control, i.e. the Rothschilds, etc., etc. So now this is chickens coming home to roost, because now the overall power structure is bigger, and when it comes down to the bottom line, whether you're white or black does not matter to them if your bloodline does not match theirs. So this is also the karma of the poor white person for not speaking out in the 1800s and contributing to slavery, and not speaking out against the bloodline families in America when England was washing itself of all its lower elements. So this is very important. So again, your $20 bill with Harriet Tubman is coming on the 100th anniversary of the women's suffrage movement, 1919, 1920 to 2019, 2020. Harriet Tubman is the unification of the black and female representation in which evil will be hidden under. And she also replaced Andrew Jackson, who was a stark opposer of central bank. So replacing him is definitely symbolic, especially when you have women at the throne, and Jewish people, of course, at the throne of how your money is going to be directed in this country and all over the world. Now, the next person we're going to look at, who actually, based on example, has actually been a positive influence, for at least from what I've seen. You never know the whole truth. But she was also recognized by Time 100, and she's also set a precedent as the first. She is the U.S. Senator from Massachusetts. Her name is Elizabeth Ann Warren. That's Elizabeth Ann Warren. And she's very important in the sense that she's also set strides in terms of women in politics. And she's a very, very notable figure with a considerable amount of influence. Let me just read a little bit about Elizabeth Ann Warren. She, on September 14th, 2011, notice all of these things happened during the Obama regime to set forth the new regime. Warren declared her intention to run for the Democratic nomination for the 2012 election in Massachusetts for the U.S. Senate. Now, why is that important? It's important because she is also the first woman to be appointed U.S. Senator from Massachusetts. So we have a bunch of firsts going on. We have Janet Yellen, the first to be head of the Federal Reserve as a woman. We have Christine Lagarde, the first woman to head the IMF. And now we have Elizabeth Warren, pardon me, who is the first woman senator from Massachusetts. Now she's also crucial because she was very influential in fighting oppressive usury rates in this country on credit cards. Um, there's a documentary that aired on PBS. I might not be able to find it, but if you can, it would be great to watch. And this is the first time I heard of her back in like '03 and '04. It's called The Secret History of the Credit Card. And in that documentary, it explains how the credit card came about in this country, and it also explains, the different ways in which the credit card has been used, and it also explains interest rates. And she's in this documentary, and she's one of the opponents of high usury rates on credit cards. So when you get your credit card and you see ridiculous usury rates like over, 15%, 20%, these high numbers, she was one of the main. This is how she got her bones, so to speak, by fighting um, kind of oppressive financial institutions and their practices. So she was definitely on point to the fact that Obama was going to appoint her as, give me 1 second. Obama was going to appoint her to a newly appointed financial committee that was created after the mortgage crisis. It was called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. This bureau was established by the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, signed into law by President Obama in July 2010. President Obama also named Warren assistant to the president and special advisor to the Secretary of the Treasury on the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau to set up the new agency. But since she was such a opposer of certain financial practices by financial institutions, Obama decided to appoint someone else as the director for Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, a male. So in any regard, she's very influential. She's a U.S. Senator from Massachusetts, and she's very, very crucial in opposing restrictive and non-beneficial financial practices by these finance institutions. So she's definitely someone to watch. So on the Mount Rushmore of influential women, you have your Janet Yellen, you have your Rosa Rios, you have Elizabeth Warren, and you have Christine Lagarde. So these are four women that you definitely need to pay attention to. But overall, the mask of evil will be used and worn and will come under as a woman. I suggest everybody pays attention to this. There's another book that will give further insight into this called The Big Drop: How to Grow Your Wealth During the Coming Collapse. And he talks about the different financial scenarios that will be set up in order to bring about certain economic change. So with that, everyone, I want to say thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. Anything that I got incorrect in terms of information, I apologize in advance. If you've learned anything that can be helpful or beneficial, I am very thankful and I'm very appreciative. Thank you for tuning in. This is A Marvelous. Have a nice day.